I still own you. Grossi Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Everybody's going to be making that I Own You shirt tonight, Grossi, and today we're going to be breaking down the Green Bay Packers victory over the Chicago Bears 24-14. Before we get to that, I want to do a big shout and thank you to some brand new Patreon and YouTube members. First, over on the Patreon side of things, we have Billy Solon, and over on the YouTube side, we have NWO Matt 125, Trayvon Holloway, we have Red Pats 85, Mitchell Sanford, Soul Train, and German Gonzalez. A big shout out and thank you to you all. So, folks, it was Bears-Packers week, the oldest rivalry in the NFL, and though it hasn't been as competitive in previous years, ever since Aaron Rodgers really has gotten there, there's always a sense of competition that goes on between these two teams, and boy, oh boy, do these fan bases not really like each other. And you saw that in the stream, you saw that on the internet, but at the end of the day, the Green Bay Packers won once again. Rodgers, 17 for 23, 195 yards, 2 touchdowns, was sacked 3 times, but also ran it 7 times for 19 yards and got a touchdown himself. Aaron Jones, 13 for 76 on the ground, 4 for 34 in the air with 1 touchdown. A.J. Dillon, 11 for 59, some big hard runs near the end of the ball game. Devontae Adams was the leading receiver, 4 for 89. Alan Lazard having a great game. This game was close. It was a close game. The Packers started slow once again. It kind of seems to be a theme going on this season, but they were able to kind of compose themselves a little bit. The defense definitely picked up, shutting out the Bears the second and the third quarter. Kenny Clark had 3 tackles on the day, 2 sacks, which were back-to-back, which were so clutch. Jonathan Garvin having a great game, had a tackle for a loss as well as a sack. You had an interception from Savage, who wound up leaving the game with an injury. He was in concussion protocol. In addition, you had Adrian Amos almost have an interception, but we'll talk about that when we start talking about the officials. Over on the Bears side of the ball, you had Justin Fields going 16 for 27 for 174 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Khalil Herbert, who looked real good, 17 for 97 and a touchdown, and their leading receiver was Allen Robinson with 53 yards. So let's talk about the terrible officiating first, because there were so many salty fans that were in there saying, oh, it's the Bears versus the refs. And they must have been watching a different game, because there was terrible officiating on both sides. So, for example, that went against the Bears. You had the neutral zone infraction that would have wiped away the interception from Darnell Savage. So that definitely should have been called. So that was a problem against the Bears. You had that holding call, which took away a TD against the Bears. However, the Bears wound up scoring a TD later on that drive. For the Packers, you had that touchdown for Equanimeous St. Brown, which was ruled offensive pass interference, though there really wasn't a push-off. Then it was ruled incomplete, even though he was in bounds. And they said, okay, never mind, he's not out of bounds, but it's still pass interference, which very ticky-tacky to say the least. In addition, you had that potential face mask on Aaron Jones. As I was talking about before, you had Adrian Amos, which it was like this close. You could argue that that was an interception. But the point is, folks, is that just be consistent. So, like, when it benefited the Packers, I called out the officiating. When it benefited the Bears, I called out the officiating. But at the same time, Kenny Clark wasn't wearing an official's uniform when he sacked Justin Fields back-to-back time, or when they just failed to stop Aaron Rodgers. So, neither here nor there. The injuries were definitely a problem in this game, as the Packers are just a beat-up football team. David Bakhtiari is eligible to practice after this week, and it looks like he is going to practice, so he technically could come back for the Washington football team game next Sunday. However, Kevin King out today. Of course, MVS still on IR. Jair Alexander still on IR. Kevin King was out today. Of course, Zadarius Smith still on IR. Josh Myers had a knee injury, which thankfully Matt LaFleur said doesn't look like it's season-ending, but he was out early in the game, and Lucas Patrick had to take over for center. Preston Smith got injured. Kenny Clark got injured at one point, but thankfully came back in the game and dominated. LaFleur said he wanted to throw up when he saw Kenny Clark being down. And where this leaves the Packers, they are currently number 1 in the division at 5-1, with the Vikings and the Bears at 3-3. We're on a 4-game win streak, heading back to Lambeau Field to take on the Washington football team, and then on a short week going to Arizona to play the Cardinals, which will be a very difficult task. And there are some other highlights of this game. Aaron Rodgers, after scoring his rushing touchdown, going and turning to the fans. Apparently, a lady in the front row flipped him off to give him the double bird, in which he then came out and said, "All of my life, I own you. I still own you." He also threw an expletive in there, which was absolutely incredible. And on top of that, something interesting from his press conference, when asked about the Packers at Soldier Field and kind of like how he feels about that rivalry, he said, "I don't think that this is my last one, but I've enjoyed every single one of them." So that will set off a whole lot of chain reactions on the internet that maybe Aaron Rodgers is considering coming back next year. But of course, it takes two to tango with the Packers front office, and he still is under contract next year, but it's only week 6, so I'm not going to jump the gun just yet. But all in all, the Packers were able to go against a very good defensive line and able to hold up with all of those injuries and able to score points. Shout out to Joe Barry for being able to adjust and put more pressure on Justin Fields, which definitely impacted the game. And I think the ultimate lesson that we learned is that if you're Robert Quinn, I don't know how you haven't learned this yet, you don't mock the belt, because Aaron Rodgers has a tendency to make you regret it. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. How do you feel about the Green Bay Packers playing today? How do you feel about them in the future? Let me know. You can always find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack, go.